Welcome to Dialogue. Today's topic is part of an extensive series on the modern dating crisis.
That is.
And we're moving past the surface level complaints today. I mean, we all know the frustrations, the swiping fatigue, the scheduling nightmares, the endless kind of repetitive first
The
dates.
how's your weekend texts.
Exactly. We want to dig into something far more structural. We're really aiming to understand the deeper systemic challenges that, explain why modern connection feels so profoundly difficult right now.
That's the key word, isn't it?
Yeah.
Systemic. This isn't
Well,
just about a string of bad luck.
no, it's not about individual bad luck. It's about a pattern of interaction that makes seeking connection feel like this exhausting, almost painful endeavor for so many people.
And that is the crucial shift we need to make today.
Right.
When we talk about a crisis, we aren't just talking about a collection of isolated incidents that happened to you.
Right.
We're examining a specific, really destructive dynamic that operates beneath the surface of every new interaction you attempt. And we're calling it the feedback loop of dysfunction.
A feedback loop.
Yes, this is the core concept we need to grasp today. How these widespread negative experiences don't just leave scars. They fundamentally change your psychological approach in a way that creates a self-reinforcing circular pattern. Things get worse because of how you react to them getting worse.
It's a tragedy of mechanism, almost. It suggests that the problem isn't simply finding the right person, but that the very protective mechanisms we adopt, the ones designed to shield us from future hurt.
They actually become the tools that guarantee our future failure. The means of self-preservation become the means of self-sabotage.
That's a powerful way to put it.
It is, because the loop starts with a genuinely painful experience, a ghosting, a betrayal, something real. But instead of just fading into memory, that pain becomes codified, becomes a strict, predictive model.
A set of rules.
Set of rules, exactly. It dictates the rules of engagement for the next person you meet. And those rules, those protective measures, are inherently toxic to the ingredients needed for true intimacy. They filter the available pool of partners, they repel genuine connection, and
Then, when the relationship inevitably falters.
the failure is misinterpreted. You see it as justification for your initial fear, not as a consequence of your own defense strategy.
So the mission of this deep dive is to understand precisely how that instinct to protect oneself in dating often backfires, leading directly to the confirmation of those initial fears.
Yes.
We're going to trace the anatomy of this destructive cycle, step by step, starting with the heavy, pervasive psychological atmosphere that really defines the modern dating world, the sheer weight of collective cynicism.
The starting point for it all.
Okay, so let's ground this in reality for a moment. For so many people who are actively looking for a relationship, their recent history is just. It's characterized by widespread negative experiences.
It is.
We're talking about the common frustrations that have become, cultural touchstones, repeated ghosting, relationships that are perpetually stuck in that situationship gray area.
That's situationship purgatory.
Right. Or partners who are emotionally unavailable, or just that constant feeling of being misled about what someone actually wants. The attrition rate is exceptionally high.
It's incredibly depleting. And that exhaustion doesn't just make you tired, it fundamentally changes the way you approach new relationships.
How so?
Well, when you step into a potential connection, you bring your entire emotional history with you, whether you realize it or not. If that history is filled with instances where your vulnerability was exploited, where you were abruptly abandoned,
Or where the person in front of you turned out to be completely different from the facade they presented for the first month.
exactly that. When that's your history, it is entirely natural. I mean, it's an act of pure survival to put up walls.
Absolutely. The emotional history dictates the approach to the next person. If you've been burned 5 times by partners who claimed they wanted commitment, but then vanished the moment things got complex.
You don't walk into the 6th scenario with a blank slate of naive optimism.
No way. You walk in carrying a history book and a shield. You're looking for proof, not possibility.
And this is where we need to analyze the prerequisite for this whole feedback loop to get started. It is so vital to understand that this isn't about 1 or 2 painful breakups from your past.
It's the scale of it.
It's the sheer volume and, critically, the commonality of this dysfunction across the modern dating landscape that shifts the collective mood toward pessimism. It's not just happening to you, it's happening to everyone you know.
Right. When almost everyone in your friend group has experienced being benched or soft ghosted or lied to about relational goals.
Then pessimism stops being viewed as just a personal defense mechanism.
Yeah.
It becomes the default rational setting for entry into the dating world. It's just perceived as being realistic.
So the starting expectation is no longer, this might work out well, but it's more like, okay, how is this going to fail, and how can I mitigate the damage when it does?
It's a risk assessment calculation that starts firmly in the red. It demands overwhelming external proof before any real emotional investment is made.
And you said this leads to a critical psychological shift, the reversal of the assumption of trust.
Precisely. Historically, or in healthier dating environments, the general cultural default leaned toward assuming good intentions. If someone was slow to respond to a message, you might assume they were busy with work or focusing on their family.
The benefit of the doubt was the default setting.
Yes. If they showed interest, you assumed that interest was genuine unless they proved otherwise through contradictory actions. You started from a place of tentative trust.
And now that transition is away from that exploratory good faith approach, so what takes its place?
What takes its place is the immediate leap to automatically assuming a potential partner is hiding something, that they're hedging their bets, or that they're actively planning to play the field.
You move from assuming sincerity to immediately questioning motives.
Right. So if they respond slowly, the internal narrative, which is fueled by all that past pain, immediately jumps to, they must be managing multiple conversations and I'm not the priority.
Or they're deliberately waiting to respond to play some kind of power game.
That's a classic one. And if they're highly complimentary early on, the thought isn't, oh, that's nice, but it's, what do they want? Is this love bombing? What's the imminent trap here?
That's the cynicism at work. It replaces genuine curiosity with constant interrogation.
And this starting point is so incredibly damaging because it dictates the entire energy of the early stages of dating. If you're operating from a standpoint of assumed malice or deception, you are constantly searching for evidence to confirm that belief.
That's classic confirmation bias, right? It's manifesting right out of the gate.
It is. You're no longer truly seeing the person in front of you. You're seeing a projection of every person who hurt you previously. You're seeing a threat that needs to be neutralized or managed.
The implication then is that the relationship dynamic is immediately transactional or defensive rather than open and exploratory.
Yes.
You're not trying to build a shared future, you're engaging in damage control before any damage has even been done. It's like putting up the storm shutters before the weather forecast even mentions rain.
A perfect analogy. And that defensiveness sets the foundation for everything that follows. If the relationship begins with defensiveness, the primary goal shifts dramatically. It moves from achieving authentic connection to achieving maximum self-protection.
And as we're about to discuss, those two goals are not only incompatible in the long term.
But the pursuit of the latter actively prevents the former.
Okay, let's unpack this. If the foundation is cynicism, the immediate result is what you call the armor we wear. We deploy specific protective behaviors aimed at minimizing pain. But it's clear that these very mechanisms, these specific behaviors, are inherently toxic to the development of mutual trust.
This is the crucial stage where self-protection transforms into self-sabotage.
So how does that happen?
Well, when an individual has decided internally that they absolutely cannot afford to be hurt again, they construct these elaborate defense mechanisms. And these defenses aren't passive. They're active forms of dysfunction within the relationship, and they usually show up in three key ways.
Let's start with the first one, which is arguably the most common symptom of modern dating: intense skepticism and pervasive suspicion. We really need to go beyond just the surface level of this.
We have to, because this is not merely cautious optimism. This is active distrust fueled by past trauma. Skepticism in this context goes way beyond healthy boundary setting.
Which is about establishing your own personal limits.
Exactly. This, however, is about establishing limits on the other person's reality. It involves constantly fact-checking them, reading into every text message with forensic intensity.
Like becoming an amateur detective about someone you've only known for 2 weeks.
That's it. Imagine receiving a text message from a new partner that reads simply, "Hey, sorry for the slow response. I was stuck on a call."
Seems innocent enough.
To a healthy mind, yes. But the actively skeptical response is not acceptance. It's a deep dive analysis. It's checking their social media last active status, cross-referencing the time of the message with their reported work schedule.
Scrutinizing the tone for any slight deviation that might indicate deception.
Right. The suspicious mind interprets neutral or even positive beta points as evidence of negative intent. The absence of an emoji becomes a sign of emotional withdrawal.
That sounds like a constant state of emotional surveillance. Every action is a potential clue to a crime that hasn't even been committed yet.
That's a perfect way to describe it. If a partner cancels a date with a legitimate excuse, a sick family member, a mandatory work trip, the suspicious person's first thought isn't empathy.
No, it immediately jumps to, what's their real plan? Are they testing me? Who are they seeing instead?
This constant search for deception makes the other person feel perpetually judged, interrogated, and eventually fundamentally distrusted. And no relationship, none, can thrive under conditions of perpetual interrogation.
No, it would be exhausting. And that constant questioning inevitably bleeds into the second major manifestation you mentioned: low trust and difficulty believing good intentions. This feels more subtle, but it's where the cynicism actively rejects opportunities for happiness.
This is a profound emotional barrier. When someone does something genuinely kind, they remember a small, seemingly insignificant detail you mentioned weeks ago, or they offer a heartfelt declaration of how much they value the connection.
The armored, knee-jerk reaction is to search for the catch.
Yes, the entire system is designed to reject positive data because genuine happiness is perceived as an indicator of maximum vulnerability.
The logic here is just heartbreaking. If I allow myself to believe this good thing is real, the eventual loss will hurt even more. So I won't believe it.
That is the fear calculation. The source of the cynicism is the expectation that all declared intentions are conditional, temporary, or masking some selfish need. If a person says, "I really appreciate how open you are with me,"
The guarded partner doesn't hear, I value your vulnerability.
no. They hear, "I'm compiling evidence," or "this is the buildup before the eventual disappointment or the inevitable demand." They're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
So they refuse to accept the emotional gift being offered because they fear the price of that gift, which is future pain.
It's the inability to accept kindness without fearing the immediate betrayal that will surely follow. And this inability to accept positive data prevents the necessary foundation for shared risk.
What do you mean by shared risk?
Trust requires believing that when a person says they care, they mean it, and they will act accordingly, even when it's inconvenient. If you reject that fundamental belief system, you can never truly lean in and commit emotionally. You always keep one foot near the exit.
That inability to lean in takes us directly to the third core protective behavior, and this one feels the most strategic and maybe the most insidious: defensiveness and emotional withholding, often deployed under the guise of plausible deniability.
This is a powerful self-controlling strategy. It's the deliberate decision to not share authentic thoughts, feelings, or vulnerabilities. The famous playing it cool approach, but elevated to a sophisticated, calculated tactic.
The goal is strategic emotional distance.
Yes, to ensure you always have the upper hand, or at the very least, you cannot be truly hurt because you haven't really invested your authentic self.
Let's define plausible deniability in this emotional context. It's not just about lying, right? It's about creating an emotional buffer.
Absolutely. Emotional plausible deniability is the strategic performance of non-commitment. It ensures that if the relationship collapses, the person can look back and truthfully tell themselves, "I never admitted I liked them that much, so I wasn't really hurt."
Or, I never suggested that future trip, so I didn't lose anything I truly valued.
Exactly. It allows them to perform this emotional calculus designed to minimize perceived loss. They never say, "I love you," until the other person has said it repeatedly, and even then their response might be muted or qualified.
And they never suggest a future plan like working a trip 6 months out.
Because that future planning represents an investment of hope, which is the ultimate risk.
So by never being the first to express interest or suggest a future plan, they retain a sense of emotional control and the ability to minimize pain upon failure. They keep the person perpetually hovering near the emotional exit door.
Correct. They've built what we might call the velvet rope of the heart. It looks appealing from the outside, but only very few carefully vetted emotions are ever allowed past that barrier.
And they feel that if they never commit their feelings verbally or through shared plans, they retain total control over the outcome.
The tragedy, however, is that this extreme guardedness starves the relationship of the very currency it needs to survive. Vulnerability is the prerequisite for intimacy. If you withhold your true feelings, you withhold the possibility of deep connection.
In effect, you have successfully protected yourself from potential future pain by guaranteeing present emotional shallowness.
That's it in a nutshell.
The combination of intense suspicion, the rejection of kindness, and strategic emotional withholding, it turns dating into an inherently antagonistic exercise. You enter expecting a fight, and you equip yourself with weapons, even if those weapons are just silence and suspicion.
And the moment that armor goes on, the relationship stops being about genuine curiosity and partnership. It starts being about surveillance and self-preservation. And that defensive posture is not passive. It is an active catalyst for the next, most destructive stage of the loop, the mechanism of the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay, so this is where the cycle really starts to accelerate.
What's fascinating here, and where the cycle truly becomes destructive, is the paradox of self-protection. You build the walls high to keep the bad actors out, but what often happens is that the walls actually filter the dating pool in ways you don't intend.
So you end up attracting or tolerating the very behaviors and people you originally feared.
Precisely. It's the self-fulfilling prophecy in full operation. By adopting this heavily armed, skeptical stance, you inadvertently ensure the relationship fails in a way that confirms your initial bias, that dating is inherently awful, and people cannot be trusted to be genuine.
Let's break down exactly how this protection attracts confirmation. You said it starts with a filtering mechanism?
Right. When someone is displaying high levels of skepticism, low trust, and intentional emotional withholding, they aren't just putting up walls. They're broadcasting an emotional status update. And that status update actively deters genuine, emotionally healthy people.
Okay, but I have to ask, if someone is truly genuine and patient, wouldn't they try harder to get past the high walls? Why do good people just give up?
That is the core misunderstanding often held by the guarded individual. The emotionally healthy partner, the one who is secure, communicative, and ready for genuine connection, recognizes those high walls immediately.
And they don't see it as a romantic challenge.
No. They interpret the defensiveness, the constant emotional testing, and the refusal to reciprocate vulnerability not as a challenge to be conquered, but as a sign that the relationship requires an unreasonable amount of emotional labor just to achieve baseline trust.
Emotional labor is a great term for this. So the cost of entries is just too high for someone who's secure.
Absolutely. A secure partner doesn't feel the need to constantly prove their innocence. They don't want to spend their relational energy defending their intentions or dismantling suspicion day in and day out. They're looking for mutual trust and reciprocal emotional investment.
So when they encounter that suspicion and withholding,
They see it as an indication of incompatibility, or, more accurately, an indication that the guarded person is not currently ready or able to build intimacy.
so they see the red flags and the defensiveness itself, and they exit gracefully. They decide that they refuse to participate in that emotional game of proving their worth.
Precisely. They recognize that the energy required to constantly reassure the guarded partner is unsustainable. They're looking for mutuality, not martyrdom. And when that secure person exits, the guarded individual interprets this departure as proof.
See? Everyone leaves when things get real.
Exactly. But they fail to recognize that the armor is what drove the genuine person away. Their defense mechanism has filtered out the exact individuals who could have challenged their cynical worldview.
That is the tragedy. The high walls accidentally keep the good people out. Now let's look at the flip side of that. How do those same walls inadvertently attract the wrong kind of person, the players, the emotionally detached?
Well, conversely, individuals who are seeking low effort, low commitment, or even emotionally manipulative connections are often strongly drawn to people who are emotionally withholding or suspicious,
Why is that?
because it mirrors their own detached style. For them, it's not a red flag, it's a green light.
The player doesn't want emotional depth or accountability anyway, so they see the emotional distance as alignment.
Exactly. A person who is just looking for a casual situation, or someone who actively avoids genuine commitment, sees extreme emotional withholding as a signal of availability for a non-demanding connection.
So they're not intimidated by the walls.
Not at all. They recognize the defensive posture as a sign that the connection won't require vulnerability, commitment, or complicated emotional engagement. If you signal skepticism and distance, they see an opportunity for a relationship that operates entirely on the surface, which is exactly what they're looking for.
Let's solidify that with an example. If a person maintains extreme emotional distance, never initiating contact, avoiding future plans, constantly speaking in vague terms, that's the withholding we're talking about.
Right. And that emotional withholding is signaling availability for a low-demand, casual arrangement.
And so when they attract someone who's only looking for that casual encounter,
Their initial fear that genuine commitment is impossible is immediately confirmed. The shallow person they attracted validates the belief that relationships are superficial and fleeting.
the person in the armor doesn't see, I only attracted this person because I signaled unavailability.
No. They see this is just how dating is now. People only want something casual.
Okay.
The defense mechanism has successfully curated an experience that proves the necessity of the defense mechanism.
This leads to the third destructive mechanism here, tolerating the confirming behavior.
Yes.
Because the individual already expects the worst, their internal standards are lowered, meaning they might tolerate unacceptable behavior for way longer than they should.
The cynicism acts like a cognitive filter that lowers the bar for acceptable treatment.
Uh-huh.
So when the partner does something disrespectful, maybe they're consistently flaky or they gaslight or they're just non-communicative,
Hmm.
the armored person views it not as a massive red flag that demands a firm boundary.
But as just how dating is now, what did I expect?
Right, this normalizing of genuinely bad behavior is incredibly dangerous because it extends the lifespan of these destructive relationships.
If you expect people to be fundamentally unreliable or dishonest, a little bit of flakiness or dishonesty doesn't trigger the true alarm bells.
It just confirms your baseline expectation.
Yeah.
And so you stay in the situation longer, thereby guaranteeing more pain and further validating your defensive strategy for the next time.
They're essentially trapped in a loop of negative reinforcement.
Constantly. They're always saying, I knew they would do this, which validates their strategy of being guarded, even though it simultaneously validates the painful experience of being mistreated.
So the proof they collect, these failed, superficial, or painful relationships, are in fact the predictable outcomes of their own defensive mechanisms.
Not just external random acts of fate. They are actively, if unconsciously, manufacturing the failure they feared. This confirms their cynical hypothesis, and they see no reason to ever take the armor off.
Here's where it gets really interesting then. We've established that the armor keeps the good people out and attracts the ones who confirm the fear. But let's consider the rare scenario. What if a genuine good person does manage to sneak past the high walls?
Right.
The excessive protection still actively sabotages intimacy, which guarantees relationship failure anyway, locking in the cynicism regardless. Intimacy is the ultimate casualty of fear.
That is the final, undeniable paradox we have to confront. If the primary goal of the individual is absolute self-protection, then the essential prerequisites for intimacy, vulnerability, shared risk, closeness, mutual trust are fundamentally unattainable.
You can't have both.
You cannot achieve true closeness while simultaneously maintaining maximum emotional distance and a perpetual state of defensiveness. They are mutually exclusive goals.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, intimacy is built on those small reciprocal risks, as you mentioned earlier.
It is.
It demands that you drop the emotional withholding, that you trust someone with your authentic self and your fears. But the defensive stance, which is fueled by the conviction that the world is unsafe, is just. It's fundamentally allergic to vulnerability.
Think about the actual process of building relational trust. It requires a series of shared, acknowledged emotional leaps. The healthy response is, I share something small and personal. You affirm it and receive it well. Then you share something small. I affirm it. We build step by step.
And the armored person breaks this mechanism immediately.
Instantly. When the partner shares a vulnerability, the armored person, operating under that intense suspicion, doesn't receive it. They analyze it for weakness or for potential manipulation rather than reciprocating with support.
So when the partner seeks affirmation,
The armored person intentionally withholds a fully authentic or vulnerable response to maintain their perceived control. They might give a generic response or change the subject, leaving the vulnerable person feeling exposed and rejected.
this leads directly to the mechanism of sabotage, the slow, corrosive erosion of trust within the relationship.
Exactly. Even if a relationship starts out promisingly, the continuous strain of suspicion and low trust just wears down the honest partner. Imagine the exhausting daily reality of being with someone who constantly requires you to prove your motives
Who doubts your legitimate excuses?
and who interprets your acts of kindness as future leverage points. What do they want from me now? The honest partner eventually just hits a wall. They get tired of having to prove their authenticity day after day.
The armored person is essentially mining the relationship for proof of betrayal, and that constant excavation just exhausts the emotional resources of the partner until they simply run dry.
And because the relationship exists under this constant scrutiny, true bonding becomes impossible. The connection remains superficial, or it's just fraught with this unresolved, unaddressed tension.
The relationship never reaches that deep, safe harbor of mutual intimacy that's required for long-term survival.
Never. The armor may keep the heart from being hurt immediately, but it guarantees that the heart will eventually be scarred of the true connection it was seeking in the first place.
Which ironically brings us to the inevitable failure. When intimacy is sabotaged by these defenses, genuine sustaining relationship success is simply impossible. The connection founders because it lacks the necessary reciprocal vulnerability and trust.
And this is the point where the cycle closes the loop and the cynicism is locked in, stronger than ever.
How
When the relationship inevitably fails, not because the partner was a secret fraud, but because the lack of intimacy caused by the defenses made it utterly untenable, the individual interprets this failure differently.
they don't see it as a result of their defensive strategy.
No, they see it as absolute proof that their initial fears were justified all along.
The ultimate confirmation bias. The person says, I knew they would let me down. I was right to protect myself, failing entirely to acknowledge that their own refusal to trust and unwillingness to engage authentically created the precise environment where failure was the only possible outcome.
The relationship fails because of the armor, but the failure is interpreted as irrefutable evidence for the necessity of the armor.
That's a brutal cycle.
It is. Had they invested fully and failed, they would risk the pain of authentic loss. But because they withheld, they experienced the manufactured loss of a connection they never truly allowed to flourish, which reinforces their defensive mechanism. This is the tragic conclusion. Relationship failure increases cynicism, which intensifies self-protection, which ensures the next partner will be met with even greater suspicion.
And the wall gets built higher.
Higher and thicker, and the individual becomes increasingly isolated in their defended state.
So what does this all mean for the listener who recognizes themselves in this incredibly isolating pattern? We've traced the anatomy of this destructive loop. Widespread fear leads to the adoption of protection, the suspicion, the withholding.
Right.
That protection then filters the dating pool toward those who thrive on shallowness.
Or repels those who don't.
Then the shallowness and suspicion sabotage any attempt at genuine intimacy. The failed intimacy confirms the initial fear, and the wall gets built higher for the next attempt. It's a tragedy of misplaced self-preservation.
The central insight here is recognizing that the instinct to protect ourselves, while absolutely understandable given the real past hurts, is often the very force that prevents the future connection we desire. The armor that was designed to save us has become a cage that locks us in isolation.
That distinction between healthy caution and debilitating cynicism seems key here.
It's everything. A healthy boundary dictates what you will tolerate from others. I will not accept being spoken to disrespectfully. The damaging armor, however, dictates what you withhold from others. I will not share my true feelings in case they are used against me.
That's a very important distinction.
It is. The ultimate protection isn't achieved by retreating. It's achieved by knowing your worth and setting clear boundaries while still allowing yourself to be genuinely seen.
So considering this feedback loop, the most challenging and potentially transformative step toward a healthier connection might not be finding the right person.
No, because many genuine people are being filtered out by the walls you've built.
Right, so the real challenge is making the courageous decision regarding how much armor we are willing to risk shedding first.
Exactly. Knowing that shedding it means risking vulnerability, but also just maybe accessing the authentic connection that lies just beyond that barricade.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, let us know in the comments what really stood out to you in this conversation, and if there's any related topic or new topic that you would like covered in a future video,